As CEO, I thought I commanded an empire until my quiet assistant walked into my office, not for instructions, but to take everything I owned. She had been playing a long game, and I was just a pawn in her final move. The mahogany door of my office always felt cold, even in the height of summer. It was a barrier, a seal of untouchable authority. Today, though, as I leaned back in my Italian leather chair, the coldness seemed to seep into my very bones. I smoothed the lapel of my tailored suit, a nervous tic I'd developed over the last decade of aggressively climbing the corporate ladder at Omnicorp. My name is Victor Sterling, and until 10 minutes ago, I was the unquestioned CEO. Just make sure the paperwork is ironclad, Mr. Henderson, I managed, my voice a gravelly parody of its usual commanding tone. Henderson, my chief legal counsel, was perched on the edge of the visitor's chair, looking like a man who just watched a slow-motion train wreck involving his entire life savings. Victor, we've been over this. The severance package is generous. Exceedingly generous, actually. 6 months' salary, full vesting of all options up to the end of last quarter, and non-disclosure agreements thicker than a novel. She signs this and she's gone. No litigation. No messy press releases. Clean break. Clean break. That's what I needed. What I demanded. The reason for this sudden, catastrophic need for a clean break was currently sipping lukewarm coffee in the executive waiting lounge, radiating a calm that was more terrifying than any outburst could have been. Samantha Hayes, my executive assistant for the past 7 years. Samantha wasn't just an assistant, she was the lubricant that kept the entire Sterling machine running. She anticipated my needs before I did, managed my schedule with surgical precision, and possessed a quiet, meticulous competence that made everyone around her look like fumbling amateurs. She was also, I had recently discovered, the daughter of the company's primary founder, a man who had died intestate a year ago, leaving his controlling shares, a massive silent chunk of Omnicorp, in a complex, opaque trust. It was the trust documents I'd foolishly tried to leverage. I needed those shares for a hostile takeover bid I was planning for a competitor, a bid that would have cemented my legacy. I'd spent 6 months working in secret with Henderson, trying to find a loophole, a clause that would allow the board, under my direction, to buy out the minority stakeholder, Samantha, without significant oversight. We'd found what we thought was a crack, a perfectly legal maneuver that would have left her walking away with a respectable but ultimately insufficient payout. I had called her into my office this morning, ready to present the offer as a generous early retirement package following a restructuring. The memory of that meeting was still razor-sharp. Samantha, dressed today in a simple, impeccably tailored charcoal suit, no bright colors, no flashy jewelry, just quiet power, had listened patiently. When I finished my carefully rehearsed speech about synergy and future direction, she didn't argue. She didn't even raise her voice. She just opened her briefcase, pulled out a single thick manila envelope, and slid it across the desk. "Mr. Sterling," she'd said, her voice low, almost musical, yet carrying the weight of granite, "I appreciate your concern for my future. However, I believe you've overlooked a critical amendment filed with the State Corporation Commission 3 months ago, the one signed by my father shortly before his final diagnosis." I had scoffed internally. We'd triple-checked those filings. Then she had leaned forward, the soft light of the morning sun catching the silver thread woven into her dark hair, and she'd simply tapped the envelope. "It appears, Victor, that as of Tuesday I am no longer a minority shareholder. I am the controlling interest, and as the controlling interest I have called an emergency, unscheduled meeting of the board of directors, effective immediately." My carefully constructed world had collapsed into dust in under 3 minutes. Henderson nervously cleared his throat. "The documents are ready, Victor. You sign, you take the golden parachute, and you walk out the back exit before the elevator doors open on the 15th floor. They'll be waiting downstairs to escort you out. It's better this way." "Walk out?" I spat, the authority in my voice now strained, reedy. "I built this company. I took it from a regional player to a global powerhouse. I will not be walked out by a glorified secretary." Henderson winced. Victor, please. She is not a secretary anymore. She's the largest shareholder, and she has the voting power to replace you with a single phone call, let alone by convening the board. You are officially being managed out. She's being generous with the exit package. Generous. The word tasted like ash. I looked at the signature line on the severance agreement. Sign it, and I save my reputation, keep my millions, and disappear into comfortable obscurity. Refuse, and she could paint me as incompetent, perhaps even greedy, and I'd be lucky to walk away with my house. When is this meeting? I asked, my jaw tight. 10 minutes ago, essentially, Henderson admitted, adjusting his tie. She's already in conference room A. The entire board is present. They've been waiting for you to sign off on your exit. My fingers brushed the pen, heavy with the weight of my entire career. I could hear the muffled sounds of the office outside, the distant thrum of phones, the quiet efficiency that was about to vanish. I picked up the pen. Fine, I growled, leaning over the pristine white paper, ready to sign away my empire to save my skin. Fine, give me the pen. Just as the tip of the Mont Blanc hovered millimeters above the signature line, the door to my office, the solid, imposing mahogany door, was thrown open. It didn't swing gently. It slammed against the wall with a sound that echoed through the penthouse suite like a starting pistol. Henderson leapt up, aghast. I froze, pen poised. Standing in the doorway wasn't a security guard. It wasn't a nervous HR representative. It was Samantha Hayes. But this wasn't the quietly efficient assistant who brought me coffee. This woman was radiating a presence so sharp, so utterly dominant, that Henderson actually took a half-step back, stumbling slightly into the credenza. She was wearing a suit I recognized instantly. A bespoke charcoal number, the fabric of which cost more than my first car, tailored perfectly to her frame. Her hair was pulled back severely, exposing the sharp angles of her cheekbones. In one hand, she held not a piece of paper, but a sleek silver tablet. In the other, she held my office keys, the ones I'd left on the corner of my desk when I'd gone to the washroom earlier. Her eyes, usually reserved, were blazing with an intensity that seemed to suck the air out of the room. She looked directly at me, ignoring Henderson entirely, and she smiled, a thin, predatory curve of the lips that held no warmth. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice now projected with an authority that bypassed the need for a microphone. "It seems we have a scheduling conflict." I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving my skin clammy and cold. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, terrified bird trapped in a cage. Henderson was staring at the door, his mouth hanging open. What are you doing here?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "Henderson, escort Miss Hayes out. Now." Henderson didn't move. He looked terrified, trapped between the two of us. Samantha took one deliberate, slow step into the room, closing the distance between us by about 3 feet. The silver tablet in her hand flashed, displaying a single, stark document in bold lettering. "I'm afraid that won't be necessary, Victor," she continued, her gaze unwavering. "I don't require escorting anywhere. I'm here for the quarterly board meeting, the one I called." She tapped the tablet screen sharply. "The one that starts in precisely 1 minute, 30 seconds. She then shifted her gaze slightly to the side, over my shoulder, as if looking past me to the empty chair where the vice-chairman usually sat. "And as of 5 minutes ago," she announced loud enough for the secretaries outside the door to clearly hear, "the board of directors, having unanimously accepted my proposal, has terminated your employment, effective immediately." My pen clattered onto the desk. I stared, unable to process the words. "No severance," she corrected softly, leaning in just slightly, her breath faintly smelling of expensive mints. "No non-disclosure. You're walking out with what's in your pockets. And Victor?" She paused, letting the silence stretch until it was almost unbearable. "You might want to look at the shareholder list for the new incoming board directors before you make your final walk of shame." She turned her head barely an inch, looking directly at the mahogany door. The door I'd assumed was my fortress just moments before. Then, the real blow landed. Not shouted, but delivered with the chilling certainty of a final decree. "Because I'm not just the controlling shareholder, Victor. I am the newly appointed unanimous choice for Chief Executive Officer of Omnicorp, and the first thing on my agenda, before we even discuss Q3 projections, is an internal audit into the last 7 years of executive compensation and expenses. Her eyes locked back onto mine, pinning me in place. Welcome to the other side of the desk, Victor. You look pale. Perhaps you should sit down before you faint. Oh, wait. She glanced pointedly at the empty chair across from my desk. There's no room for you there anymore. My mind registered the change in seating arrangement before my lungs remembered how to draw air. CEO, Samantha Hayes. The title didn't just belong to her, it seemed to have physically radiated from her, absorbing all the residual authority that had ever clung to my seat. The room, moments ago my sanctuary of power, now felt like a brightly lit interrogation cell, and I was the one under examination. Henderson, bless his pathetic corporate soul, had finally found his voice, though it was trembling violently.
Samantha, Miss Hayes, this is irregular. Highly irregular. We must follow procedure. Victor needs to review the termination paperwork. The company bylaws clearly state. Samantha cut him off with a gesture so casual, so dismissive, that Henderson actually stopped mid-sentence, looking like a poorly programmed robot whose primary function had just been erased. Mr. Henderson, she said, turning her attention to him, her voice softening slightly, which was infinitely more terrifying than her earlier sharpness. I trust you are familiar with the Emergency Corporate Restructuring Clause, Article 4B, subsection 2. It grants the controlling shareholder the right to immediate executive appointment and removal in the event of perceived fiscal mismanagement or undue corporate risk exposure. I believe Victor's secret negotiations regarding the acquisition of Trident Dynamics without prior board consent certainly qualify as undue risk. She paused, letting the accusation hang heavy in the air. Trident Dynamics. The deal I was so proud of. The one that would have made me a billionaire on paper. The deal she must have uncovered through her meticulous review of my hidden correspondence. Victor, she addressed me again, stepping fully into the office, gliding around the corner of my massive desk. I instinctively recoiled, pressing myself back into the leather. She didn't touch me, but the close proximity felt like a physical violation. We need to discuss your immediate departure. You have 60 seconds to gather any personal effects from this office. After that, security will escort you to the elevator, and you will surrender your company assets, including this. She delicately tapped the diamond-encrusted watch on my wrist, a gift from the board 5 years ago. It's company property, Victor. Standard operating procedure. 60 seconds. My empire reduced to a brief scavenger hunt for my wallet and phone. I forced myself to stand up, my legs shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the desk for support. I looked around the room, the panoramic view of the city I thought I commanded, the framed awards, the sheer brutal testament to my success, and it all looked alien, mocking. You can't do this, I managed, my voice cracking on the word can't. The shareholders will revolt. The market will tank when they see you, a former PA, running the ship. Samantha sighed, a sound of deep, weary disappointment. That paperwork was filed, approved, and signed off by the major institutional investors before your miserable little firing meeting was even scheduled. Henderson suddenly looked less terrified and more deeply professional, albeit utterly shell-shocked. He reached slowly for his own briefcase. Ms. Hayes, Director Hayes, if you require my services in briefing the transition team, I am at your disposal. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. You may remain on the transition team, reporting directly to me. Now if you could please coordinate security to ensure Mr. Sterling leaves discreetly. I need this office ready for my first executive call in 30 minutes. The sheer speed of it was dizzying. I had been blindsided by a woman I paid to organize my dry cleaning. My rage was instantly replaced by a sickening cocktail of humiliation and dawning comprehension. I spun around, grabbing the heavy, leather-bound photo album from my credenza, a collection of pictures from company retreats, gala dinners, moments where I played the benevolent, powerful patriarch. It was the only thing I truly cared about keeping. As I clutched the album, Samantha watched me, a hint of something unreadable in her eyes. Pity? Contempt?
You know, Victor, she said quietly, walking toward the door she had so forcefully entered through. When I started here, I had 2 degrees and 0 debt. I took this job because I needed to understand the mechanics of power from the ground up. I needed to see how men like you operate when they think no one is watching the details. She reached the door, her hand resting on the polished brass handle. And I learned everything. I learned who you pay off, who you silence, and exactly where you hide the real ledgers. My stomach dropped. Hidden ledgers? I only had 1 or 2 minor creative accounting entries related to offshore holdings. Nothing that would stick. Nothing serious enough to warrant this level of corporate coup. What are you talking about? I demanded, my voice shaking the album in my hands. Samantha turned back, her expression now hardening into something truly menacing. I'm talking about the missing $80 million from the Malaysian infrastructure bid 3 years ago, Victor. The one that wiped out the pension fund's surplus. You thought that money just vanished into an anonymous shell corporation, didn't you? My throat went dry. That had been my masterpiece of quiet theft. It was untraceable. Or so I thought. You won't find that in any company ledger, Victor, she continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet piercing the silence of the vast office. But you will find it in the transaction records of a small private brokerage firm based in Zurich. A firm that happens to be the sole operating asset of the Hayes Family Trust. She met my wide, panicked stare with absolute control. You didn't just fire your secretary, Victor. You just declared war on the only person who knows exactly where all your dirty money is buried. And I assure you, I am not interested in a golden parachute. I'm interested in justice and retribution. She opened the door, and this time I saw who was waiting in the hallway. It wasn't just the usual security detail. Standing shoulder to shoulder with the Omnicorp guards were 2 massive, impeccably dressed men in dark suits, men who wore the undeniable bearing of federal agents, not corporate muscle. They were looking right at me, their faces grim and expectant. Your time is up, Mr. Sterling, Samantha said, stepping aside to allow the approaching figures a clear line of sight into my former office. The SEC will be very interested in hearing your version of those missing $80 million. The air crystallized. The 2 men in dark suits flanking the doorway were not corporate security. They were too still, too quiet, their eyes too practiced at assessing threat levels rather than escorting exiting personnel. They wore discreet earpieces, and the way they held themselves spoke volumes of jurisdiction and subpoena power. Federal agents. The implication hit me like a physical blow, driving the breath clean out of my lungs. $80 million routed through the Hayes Trust. She hadn't just been managing my schedule, she'd been tracking my most profitable sins. My grip tightened reflexively on the leather-bound album. It suddenly felt less like a collection of memories and more like a liability, a piece of incriminating evidence I was foolishly trying to smuggle out. SE key? I croaked, the word tasting metallic on my tongue. You filed a report? With the Securities and Exchange Commission? Samantha stepped fully into the hallway, positioning herself between me and the federal agents, claiming the threshold of the office as her new boundary. I filed comprehensive evidence, Victor. They are here as a courtesy to ensure a smooth transfer of assets and, eventually, to facilitate your cooperation regarding your financial indiscretions. They are quite keen to interview you about the discrepancies in the Malaysian bid. She looked back at me, her expression softening just enough to convey utter finality. They will wait for you to gather your wallet and keys. The photo album is not considered essential company property, so you may keep that. Consider it a parting gift, a reminder of the life you built on the backs of others. The 2 agents, one tall and hawk-nosed, the other broader, radiating quiet menace, shifted slightly, their attention fixed entirely on me. The hawk-nosed one subtly nodded toward the door. The message was clear. Cooperate now, or the courtesy ends. Henderson, seeing the federal presence, immediately transitioned from shocked counsel to terrified accomplice. He scrambled back to his chair, pulling out his phone with frantic haste. I need to notify the compliance department and the external auditors. Director Hayes, may I suggest we redact Mr. Sterling's access rights immediately? All digital footprints, cleared. Do it, Mr. Henderson. Every single key fob, VPN access, and email forwarder, Samantha confirmed, her voice calm amid the rising panic. And when you are finished, prepare a full breakdown of the Trident Dynamics negotiation file. I want to see every draft Victor created. I felt a strange, almost dissociative calm wash over me. The rage had burned out, replaced by a cold, terrifying clarity. I couldn't run. I couldn't bluff. She had anticipated every move, including my secret offshore accounts, by making herself the gatekeeper of the very system I thought I controlled. I slowly walked to my desk, deliberately avoiding looking at the agents. I opened the top drawer, retrieved my slim leather wallet, my car keys, and my phone. I placed them neatly beside the severance papers I had been about to sign. Then, I picked up the photo album. It was heavier than I remembered. "You think this is over, Samantha?" I asked, my voice steadying, tinged now with a desperate, wounded pride. "You think exposing a few questionable accounting entries is going to stop me? I have resources, I have contacts that reach far beyond the SEC. Samantha leaned against the doorframe, crossing her arms. "I know exactly who your contacts are, Victor. I've been reading their emails for years. You underestimate me because you see a woman in a skirt, not a strategic mind capable of rebuilding an entire financial infrastructure overnight." I looked from her triumphant face to the stone-faced federal agents. If I went with them now, it would be an admission of guilt, a public fall that would destroy my credibility forever. But if I resisted, I saw the way the broader agent shifted his weight, readying himself. "One thing, Samantha," I said, my voice low, drawing all attention back to me. "You said you learned everything by watching me. You learned about leveraging power, about moving money, about ruthlessness." I opened the photo album to a specific page, a picture of me receiving an honorary doctorate from a European university, Samantha standing unobtrusively in the background, holding my doctoral hood. "You learned all that from me," I repeated. "But there's one thing you haven't learned yet, because you haven't had to use it." I took a deep, preparatory breath, ignoring the subtle rustle as the agents tensed. I had to detonate this situation, not just for escape, but for revenge. "You think you're the CEO now, Samantha. You think the board is loyal. You're forgetting one crucial detail about corporate takeovers. Control is temporary. Loyalty is bought, not earned." I slammed the heavy photo album down onto the desk, not at the severance papers, but directly onto my private line phone, the secure line that bypassed the switchboard and connected directly to the chairman of the board's private residence. The impact shattered the phone's screen and, more importantly, triggered the emergency, encrypted override sequence built into the phone's hardware, a backdoor sequence only I knew. "You may have the paper trail, Samantha," I spat, finally finding my real voice, the voice of a cornered predator. "But I still have the panic button." Before Samantha could react, before the agents could move, the secure line, now showing fractured digital sparks across its broken screen, emitted a single, piercingly loud, high-frequency tone, a proprietary signal designed to force an immediate, unscheduled, emergency board video conference, using the systems installed in every director's home office, overriding all current meetings and locking everyone in. Samantha's composure finally broke. Her eyes widened, losing their icy control as she stared at the ruined phone. "What did you just do?" she demanded, stepping away from the doorway, clearly alarmed by the sudden intrusion of other powerful players. "I just alerted every single board member that you have unilaterally seized executive control using potentially fraudulent documentation regarding the founding trust, and that the former CEO is currently under federal investigation," I yelled, feeling a dangerous surge of adrenaline. "That conference call is now live, Samantha. You think you have the votes now. Let's see if they vote for the quiet secretary or the man who built this company, the man who just alerted them that you might be committing securities fraud yourself by leveraging the trust assets to prosecute me." The hawk-nosed agent turned his head sharply toward Samantha, his gaze shifting from me to her, with sudden, intense scrutiny. "Director Hayes," the agent said, his voice sharp and official, directed now entirely at her. "We need to know the status of that emergency override signal. Is this a hostile takeover in progress?" The sharp, official query from the federal agent, the one I'd privately nicknamed Hawknose, cut through the tense silence like a scalpel through silk. Samantha froze, caught precisely where I had aimed, Between the threat of my known corporate crimes and the sudden, terrifying implication that her own seizure of power might be viewed by external authorities as an illegal corporate raid. Her composure, the impenetrable facade she had constructed over the last hour, finally fractured. Her jaw tightened, and her eyes flickered between the federal agents, the broken phone on the desk, and me, Victor Sterling, suddenly finding solid ground beneath my feet again. "It's a defensive measure," Samantha managed, her voice strained but regaining a semblance of her earlier command. "Mr. Sterling is attempting to obstruct a legitimate transition of power by triggering a false alarm." Hawknose ignored her, looking directly at the destroyed phone. "We require verification of that override signal, Director Hayes. If this office is compromised, we need to secure the premises before external parties influence the proceedings." This was it. The narrow window I had manufactured with the ultimate act of corporate sabotage. I didn't need to win the fight. I just needed to make her lose control long enough for the board. My board, the people I'd kept happy with bonuses and insider tips for years, to second-guess her perfect sudden ascension. "False alarm?" I scoffed, leaning over the desk, pointing dramatically at the fractured screen. "That system is hardwired into the personal security matrix of all 12 board members. They are on a mandatory encrypted video link right now, Samantha. And the first thing they hear when that alarm rings is the sound of a federal agency arriving to investigate the sudden disappearance of $80 million linked directly to the Hayes Trust." I turned to the agents, adopting my most reasonable, aggrieved tone, the tone that won hostile negotiations. "Gentlemen, I was about to peacefully resign and accept a generous severance package to avoid exactly this kind of market panic. She refused. She initiated a coup, and now she's trying to frame me for obstruction of justice after I merely attempted to secure company assets." The larger agent, who hadn't spoken yet, finally stepped forward, placing himself squarely between Samantha and the doorway, effectively blocking her exit. "Director Hayes," the larger agent said, his voice a low rumble, "we need to see the current active board roster on that tablet immediately. We need to know who is currently participating in this conference." Samantha gripped the silver tablet so tightly, her knuckles were white. She knew that if she displayed the roster, which would show the names of the directors who voted for her minutes ago, the agents would see the time discrepancy between her appointment ratification and the emergency security alert I had just triggered. She had been too fast. My panic button was designed to expose speed as recklessness. She hesitated for a fatal second, calculating her next move. In that silence, the hidden speaker in the ceiling, connected to the emergency conference line, crackled to life. "What in God's name is going on in Sterling's office?" boomed the voice of old Mr. Albright, the longest-serving, most conservative member of the board. His voice was laced with genuine terror. "We just ratified a change in leadership, and now the building is on lockdown? Sterling, is that a federal agent I hear?" Samantha spun back to the speaker, desperate to regain the narrative. "Mr. Albright, everything is under control. Victor is being escorted out." "No!" I shouted, cutting her off, pointing at the agents. "They are here because she has hidden funds she used to buy control. $80 million stolen from the pension fund via the very trust she now controls." The boardroom erupted in a cacophony of panicked voices over the ceiling speaker. "Stolen funds? Securities fraud? Samantha, what is the meaning of this?" Samantha looked defeated, trapped by the very transparency she thought she had mastered. She had planned for my resignation. She had not planned for an active federal investigation being leveraged against her. She took the throne. She slowly lowered the tablet. Her fight drained away, replaced by a chilling stillness. She knew the political tide had turned in the span of 60 seconds. The board, faced with immediate SEC scrutiny, and the messy implication of insider trading tied to the Hayes Trust, would not risk their own necks backing a fast-moving coup leader. They would retreat to the safest option, the known devil. She looked at me, her eyes burning with a fury so potent it felt like a physical heat. "You haven't won, Victor. You've merely delayed the inevitable. You're still facing an audit and you're still ruined. You just took me down with you." She handed the tablet, deactivated, to Hawknose. "The roster is on there. I require counsel immediately. I will not speak further without legal representation." The agents took the tablet, their focus now solely on verifying the emergency link and confirming the identities of the other directors. The larger agent nodded curtly to me. Mr. Sterling, you are not under arrest at this moment. Remain on the premises until we verify the situation. Do not leave this office. I stood tall, feeling the adrenaline surge one last time, not from fear, but from survival. I was cornered, but not defeated. I had bought myself time. As the agents began coordinating with the bewildered board members over the secure line, I leaned back against my desk, ignoring the broken phone and the splintered remnants of my power. I looked at Samantha, standing rigidly by the door, officially suspended by the chaos she created. "You're right, Samantha," I said quietly, picking up the photo album, now feeling the satisfying weight of it. "I haven't won. Not yet. But I taught you well. You learned how to build a fortress. Now let's see if you learned how to defend it when the siege begins." I looked past her, toward the hallway, where the other directors would soon be demanding answers and likely reinstating the man they felt they knew. "When you get your new counsel," I added, just loud enough for her to hear, "tell them to read the fine print on your father's will, because while you may control the voting shares, I still control the votes of the executive committee. And I'm calling my first emergency session in 10 minutes. You'll be sitting outside that door, waiting for my appointment, just like I was waiting for yours."